This is the story of the most evil woman in the history of Europe. I bring to you the story of Elizabeth Bathory, history's most feared countess. Elizabeth was born in 1516 into one of the most powerful families in Hungary. The Bathory bloodline was filled with princes, judges, and warriors. Power surrounded her from the moment she opened her eyes. But so did darkness. Her childhood was not peaceful. Historians describe a world of violent punishments, public executions, and political brutality. It was said that young Elizabeth witnessed servants being beaten, mutilated, or killed for small mistakes. In noble households of the time, cruelty was not hidden, it was part of discipline. But for Elizabeth, it seemed to plant something deeper. There were also stories of illness. Some accounts say she suffered from violent seizures as a child, possibly epilepsy. In those days, such conditions were treated with strange remedies, including rubbing blood on the skin or even drinking it. Whether true or not, these early experiences helped shape the dark legends that followed her name. At just 11 years old, she was engaged to Ferenc Nadezhdy, a feared warrior. By 15, she was married and moved into Szeged Castle, a cold stone fortress perched high above the countryside. Her husband spent most of his life on battlefields, earning the nickname, the Black Knight of Hungary, for his ruthless tactics. But war did not leave cruelty behind, it brought it home. When he returned from campaigns, stories say he would share methods of punishment he had seen or used on enemies. Some claim he gifted Elizabeth cruel devices, iron claws, sharp tools, and instruments meant to tear skin. Whether every detail is true or not, witnesses later testified that the castle became a place of fear under their rule. At first, the punishments were what nobles called discipline. A servant burned bread. Others stitched a dress unevenly. A girl pulled the countess's hair while combing it. For these mistakes, Elizabeth would slap, whip, or starve them. But her anger was never small. It was explosive, uncontrolled, and often deadly. Servants were beaten until their bones cracked. Some were forced to stand naked in winter courtyards while freezing water was poured over them. Others had needles pushed under their fingernails. Some were burned with hot irons or cut with knives for the smallest errors. And this was only the beginning. As years passed, the violence grew worse. Elizabeth surrounded herself with a group of loyal servants who assisted in her cruelty. They lured young peasant girls to the castle with promises of work, food, clothes, a better life. Instead, they found torture chambers. Witnesses later described girls being hung upside down, beaten, or forced to bite their own flesh in agony. Some were locked in cages. Others were cut again and again, slowly, as if their suffering were meant to last as long as possible. Then came the story that made her name immortal. One day, a servant girl accidentally pulled Elizabeth's hair while brushing it. Enraged, the countess beat her violently. Blood splashed onto Elizabeth's hand. According to legend, she noticed how pale and smooth her skin looked where the blood had touched it. From that moment, the story says, she believed blood could preserve her youth. Whether this part was exaggerated over time or not, the killings became more organized, more frequent, and more secretive. Girls were drained of blood. Bodies were buried in shallow graves or hidden within castle walls. Some were carried away at night so no one would notice. At first, the victims were peasant girls. No one powerful enough to demand answers. But eventually, Elizabeth grew bolder. She began targeting daughters of lesser nobles. And that was her greatest mistake. Families with influence began to ask questions. Complaints reached the royal court. The king ordered an investigation. In 1610, soldiers arrived at Szeged Castle. What they found was beyond anything they expected. Dead bodies. Dying girls. Rooms stained with blood. Victims still breathing but horribly mutilated. The horror was no longer rumor. It was proof. Elizabeth's servants were arrested and tortured until they confessed. Some claim she had killed over 600 girls. Whether the number was accurate or exaggerated, it was enough to make her one of the most infamous killers in history. Her accomplices were executed in brutal fashion. But Elizabeth herself was too powerful to be executed. Her noble blood protected her from public punishment. Instead, she was sealed inside her own castle. Workers built a small chamber around her, breaking up the walls so she could not escape. Only a tiny slit remained, just enough to pass food and air. No door. No freedom. No servants to command. For 4 years, she lived inside that stone prison, alone with her thoughts, her memories, and the darkness she had created. In 1614, a guard looked through the slit and saw her lying motionless on the floor. The Blood Countess was dead. But her name never died. Even today, the story of Elizabeth Bathory remains one of the darkest in human history, a tale of power without mercy, cruelty without limits, and a woman whose hunger for control turned a castle into a slaughterhouse. And that is the story of the Blood Countess.